Okay, let's jump into our next session. We are now going to have a deep dive at a case study, shaping ecosystems around evolving technologies. David, can I please invite David to the stage? Please join me in welcoming David Aldred to the stage. Have a seat.
Where would you like me?
Please, here. Brief introduction. Thank you for joining me. Brief introduction, David. David is the Managing Director, Treasury and Trade Solutions Business Head, MENA and Pakistan at Citi. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great. I mean, I've had the pleasure of sitting here all day in a very nice, comfy chair, talking to these great panellists. But this is a really nice time we have here to really get into the weeds a little bit and talk about some case studies. But before we go more deeply, David, let's start with just your top 3 transformational technologies that you think really we should keep an eye on.
Yeah, and look, and perhaps I'll get onto those. I'm not going to dodge that issue, right? Because I'm sure there's lots of debate, and if we had a straw poll, there'd be lots of different views. I think, look, the first thing to say is that what's really exciting in the MENA region, I tell this to all my partners in Citibank across EMEA and the rest of the world, is to watch the space in MENA of what's going on and how this region is really leveraging technology. Just a quick point, we saw EDB in the announcement in Bahrain, which Citi's proud to be part of, with 1,000 new programmers. We see what's going on with fintech up at ADGM this week and what DIFC's doing. So, and a lot of the governments are, and the phrase I use to really drive it home is seizing technology and leapfrogging many of the developed economies, right? So I'm not avoiding, I'm coming back to it. So I think we get caught up with individual technology. So I've thought a lot about this, and one of the phrases, and we love jargon, right, in all our businesses, but I'll use the word hyperconnectivity. And why I use that, because I think it brings together some of the technology. So that's one, hyperconnectivity. What do we mean? Connecting the dots, connecting consumers, connecting corporations, connecting government and citizens all together. And what that is it's a combination of technology, whether it be cloud, whether it be 5G, whether it be APIs, and just the internet, right, is there, and it's a combination. So it's not one single application. But I think when we go, as we go on and we explore some of the case studies, it's that hyperconnectivity that we're seeing. And I heard the panelists from the earlier session on some of the conversation around supply chain, global supply chain, around the increasing payment technology. They're all fundamental parts of it. So I'd encourage everyone to think of hyperconnectivity and how you use technology, whether it be cloud, whether it be mobile, whether it be APIs, that creates that 24/7. Then I would embed in that, as a banker, payment technology. And payments, believe me, are transforming. And they are a cornerstone of economic development, without a doubt. I know we'll come on to that. Lots of stats around GDP growth linked to digital payments. But what governments are doing, and Bahrain were one of the first out of the blocks with Fowry Plus. The UAE has instant payments. Morocco, Jordan, also instant payments. Egypt is this desire to solve for financial inclusion, to drive economic development through increased efficiency and the ability for certainty of payments. That is a major economic stimulation, and payment technology then has multiple areas that it can go in. So again, hyperconnectivity, how we connect all the dots and the underlying technology, and then payment technology. And I think your fellow panelists talked then about data and AI. I'm not ignoring blockchain. I think blockchain has a very important part around the security aspect. It's obviously being used a lot in the crypto space at the moment, and I think central banks will evolve that as they look at
we can't have a conference without mentioning blockchain, so thank you very much.
But blockchain is a solution looking for a problem at the moment. It has to solve for risk, okay? But the Citi view is next 3 to 4 years it will become more mainstream. But it's there to solve the cyber security that we have as a result of all this technology. So I still think it's very important. But when I come back to AI and data, what we see and what our clients tell us is that real thirst for data to make informed decisions, whether it be about sales behavior, whether it be about supply chain, whether it be about risk in their business, whether it be about governments and how they interact with their citizens around the healthcare ecosystem. That data quality and timeliness of that is incredibly important. So I'd love to debate it. We all have different views, but hyperconnectivity, the whole of the payment technology, and then the data AI side of it.
Yeah. And Dave, just very quickly, just from a macroeconomic perspective, I find that really, really, really interesting. You're right, I don't think it's the one technology, but from a macro perspective, I think the countries, the economies that will benefit, we're the ones that combine these technologies together. Yes. So it's not a singular technology to focus on, it's the combination and addressing these problems. David, we had a great conversation yesterday, I think it was, preparing for this discussion, but I want to just talk about legacy systems and long-standing companies. And, I'm not naming any names, not pointing any fingers here, David, but how do people deal with legacy systems? I mean, is it really just about throwing out that system and going new, or actually trying to upgrade that system?
Yeah,
that's a tough choice.
And it's a great question, and I think if I had the answer to that, I think I'd be a consultant. But it's something that every organisation has to address. If I look at my own industry, right, let me pick on banking.
Yep.
A bank like Citi in 95 plus countries around the world. We have lots of legacy applications, and it's very expensive to maintain, and it's very expensive to upgrade. But you have a strong competitive angle. We have a lot of digital banks that are being created across the region. You, of course, have a growing and vibrant fintech community, and you even have traditional competitors like a Goldman Sachs, that are traditional and investment bank, have come into the transaction banking space. Why? They go straight to cloud, straight to API, no legacy. So that's one ecosystem that is going to see a lot of change. But you can't just rip out old technology because it's robust, it works.
Right.
The rails that route for Citibank $4 trillion a day in payments value is stable, right, to a certain degree. However, does it allow for agility? Does it allow for growth in new markets, new sectors, new opportunities? It's not as agile as you would like. So if you apply that to any lens of an organization, and we speak to a lot of corporations on this, it's a struggle. And what you've seen is the appointment of chief digital officers, chief technology officers have morphed into more of that role. And I would say that if there is not a 5-year digital strategy where you are complementing existing with new, and making those difficult decisions, then it's time to accelerate that decision making. But it's a journey, and it's a challenge for all traditional companies. But don't give up, because the value proposition of brand, of stability, of trust is incredibly important. But just be very wary of the competition is the key aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And trust, I think we spoke about with the first discussion with Chrissy, particularly from a government perspective, but trust is so important.
Yep.
And as people transition and talk about either upgrading or new system, moving customers, clients, partners, whoever you work with, from a legacy system to a new or an upgraded, I mean, that's got to be handled smoothly. You don't want to lose data, and you also don't want to disrupt the service that you're providing. So this is a big deal. This is a really, really big deal.
Yeah, and it's fraught with risk. And that's why you're seeing, I think, in many organizations, these multi-year transformation strategies.
Yep.
One of your previous panelists spoke about SAP as an ERP platform. Oracle, there are other ERP platforms like Oracle and others, of course. And they're key to an organization. But what is the right platform to allow scale? And when I talked about hyperconnectivity, what cloud does is allow you to scale from day one,
right?
Because of the lack of that legacy infrastructure. So many of the organizations we talk to around the markets they want to target, the client segments they want to target, is understanding, does that technology allow scale and allow some form of agility later on, so that you're not investing dollars or dirhams in technology that you will throw away in 2 years' time. Right?
That's a hard choice.
Very hard choice. But at the same time, your point then is not disrupting the existing client base. We hear a lot about cyber attacks around the time, and the loss of client data. And so that role of chief digital officer has become not just about development and implementation of new technology to support the business, but also a key component then is the risk governance around that technology and what potential risk factors it opens up to the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to ask about cloud, David. I know I just sort of agreed with you a few minutes ago that yes, it's the combination, but from listening to your talk, it almost sounds like cloud is a central piece, whatever other technologies you add to it and combine with it, but it almost, is cloud a must? Is it almost sounds central to this transition.
Look, I think it has to be part of the equation.
Right.
It's certainly an enabler. Of course, there are regulations, and many governments talk about the onshoring of data, which we understand, and data privacy is very important. So I think we're at that earlier stage around cloud adoption. Would you put all your ERP and accounting platform on cloud? Some companies have. Other companies will have a risk assessment which says no, we won't do that. So I think it is complementary at this stage. Because as I laugh around some of the technology investments we have to make, and we say, well, we can't prioritize it this year, we'll do it next year. And I say, well, by next year, the technology you want to implement this year will be overtaken by something new. Right? So I would say, Citi is no exception, cloud is clearly part of our technology strategy, but it's not the only thing. It's not the only way of doing it. And then you have to look at the whole, from a risk side, the whole disaster recovery, contingency aspects, which goes beyond cloud as well.
And that just has to be there in the background, the sort of disaster strategy, emergency strategy, all that sort of stuff. Every company needs that.
But it shouldn't put off from having a very robust and forward-looking technology strategy.
And that's the challenge I find with people dealing with risk in general, that sometimes preparing for risk and preparing things that may not happen, but you still have to put the time in. And have those systems and plans and processes in place so you don't. But David, let me just quickly ask you a question without notice about that. You mentioned data onshoring. What's your perspective on the balance between data localization? I can understand the government incentive to have data stored within your borders versus not. Because maybe from a private or an economist group perspective, maybe the free flow of data is a good thing. What's your perspective on that balance between onshoring and offshoring?
Look, I understand it. I think, in a perfect isotropic world, you would love one central data storage. But I think we have to recognize that's not going to happen I think probably for all the right reasons. As you look at governments and countries around the world, I think that sort of protection of data is sacrosanct, and I think you have to respect that. But I think then as a business, you have to understand that's a cost of doing business. And that one size doesn't fit all. And so when you look at your growth strategies, you look at the countries you might want to target or the client segments, you do have to factor that in. And that's a big cost component that you have to think about, of replicating technology on a country-by-country basis. So it's one that I don't think I can potentially answer, because we have to respect the regulations that are driven by central banks, and they're there for a reason. They're there to protect countries and citizens. And I think over time it will play out as governments and countries get more comfortable with technology. Because let's not forget, a lot of this is accelerated. It was accelerating pre-COVID.
Here we are.
And boy, has it accelerated post-COVID. Where everyone now wants to stimulate economies, wants to drive efficiency, wants to drive connectivity, and you can only do that through having a very robust digital transformation strategy.
And all these conversations help. These events, more events, we need to keep talking about this stuff. And again, I think I mentioned it earlier, just my own plug, is that I do hope we see more trade agreements, but trade agreements that focus on digital trade. And maybe that's not a free flow of data, but it's setting the rules of the road, giving the guidelines.
I think a good example, and something we often overlook, is then documentation around digital. We look at the front end, and we look at the processing, but how easy is it for, whether it be a client of a bank or an entity looking to do business with a government or a corporation, to digitally sign an agreement? And that's something that also through the pandemic has changed. Things like verification of identities on Zoom has become an approved method of verifying people now.
Wow.
Who would have thought that 18 months ago?
Not me.
No. The use of digital signatures as well, rather than wet ink signatures, has accelerated purely because of the pandemic. But it needed that catalyst, and I think many industries are hoping that continues and we don't revert
to paper.
To other ways of doing business. But having that documentation stored in the cloud, signed digitally, to then allow
Yep.
the financial flow is just as important as the underlying financial flow.
Yeah, lots to watch here, lots to discuss. David, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'd love to give the audience an opportunity for any questions. And also online, you can submit questions to me online. I mean, amazing. Look, this is the transition we're talking about here, everyone. Here's paper, here's digital. But I think we have a question here at the front. Is there a microphone here at the front? Coming to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, is it on? Yeah, it's on. Sorry. A question for David. My name is Nasreen. I'm the CEO of Yux Net-a-Porter in the Middle East. So we're based in Italy as headquarters, so we're GDPR compliant, which means that any customer that we acquire anywhere in the world, and we work with you as well, we're one of your clients, we would then have to store them in Italy under GDPR compliant rules, which obviously I'm all in favor of. Can you see a time when it wouldn't be allowed by local jurisdictions? I think that kind of was a sort of a question that came before, where Saudi Arabia might say a Saudi Arabian customer has to be kept in the cloud in Saudi Arabia and follows our version of GDPR and so on and so forth. The reason I'm asking that is because as much as I believe in GDPR and what it does and why it's good for the customer, there are other local competitors who wouldn't follow that.
Yep.
They would follow the local laws. And as we develop and we become better at everything we're doing, we might have rules here that are even more restricted than GDPR, or they might be as flexible as the US. So I don't know if my question is clear.
No, it is, and it's a difficult one for me to answer, right? But it's a great question, and let me try and think. And I understand how. One of the key things here is standardization, okay, and that's something globally, which is a challenge for all regulators. Is how do you standardize data, formats, documentation, and that's something governments are grappling with. Things like ISO XML, being standardized now across EU, right? That's just in the EU. It's not being standardized elsewhere. So you have these. So if it's standardized only in 26, 27 countries, then other countries can't access it. And the same then around data law. So I understand where you're coming from in terms of would a particular country look to not participate because it might stop local growth with their SME community and growth there. There is a potential for that, okay? And you can understand that argument. However, one thing that technology is doing, it is attracting, yes, internal investment. It's attracting those local unicorns, through sandboxes, that local development of technology through homegrown technology and homegrown talent. But it's also attracting a lot of foreign investment. Okay, let's not forget that. And that is what's helping, when we chatted yesterday about economic stimulation, is that this is a virtuous circle which is increasing competition, it's increasing agility, and it's making that country even more competitive by having a very strong technology backbone.
Right.
So I don't think, and I'm going to be a typical politician here, I can't fully answer that. I would love it to be standardized globally, right? And all countries to sign up to it, but that will take time and that will be a journey as different countries at different stages of their evolution get used to this technology. So I think there will be in some countries barriers over time, globally. And that is where you need that sort of agility. You do need people on the ground, right? You can't just manage everything out of one country, right? Because you need to deal with local regulations. So I think it's watch this space. I think we should be moving towards that global standardization. I think it will take time, but it should not prevent doing business, because I think from everything that I work with governments, corporations, banks and non-banks, there's a real thirst to getting that balance right between local organizations and using the global technology players as well. Sorry, bit of a round answer, but it is a very thorny issue which will be resolved over time.
Good answer, David. As an economist, we answer everything with "it depends," but that's a really good answer. You said you're not a politician, but that's good. One last question, and then we'll close before wrapping up.
Hi, thanks.
Please.
Yasmin Al-Shura from the Central Bank of Bahrain. Regulators have a big role to play in supporting digital transformation, and regulatory sandboxes have been a pivotal tool to do so. How do you foresee the evolution of regulatory sandboxes? What is the future of them?
Well, they are fundamental. They are crucial to the point I made about countries getting familiar with new technology. Particularly if I look at my space around fintechs, around licenses being given to non-banks. The traditional bricks and mortar bank have been involved in payments, but our competition, and quite frankly they are our competition, but they're also partners and clients of ours. So not only are the banks, but the regulators have to get very, very comfortable that the end-to-end process can be managed, not just from a compliance, but from a payment processing, from a data privacy, from a client protection, et cetera, et cetera. So I see the sandboxes as crucial. It is. I forget the phrase, but you've got to try to fail, right? And I think we will see that. I think where the challenge is how do you attract investment to stimulate that? And this is that virtuous circle I was talking about, is that with governments embracing the sandbox concept, seeing the local, I use the phrase unicorns, whether they be a digital company, a fintech, whatever, e-commerce player, showing what that value is to the economy and to citizens, because it's not just about e-commerce and selling product, it could be providing better healthcare services, better transportation services, etc. That sandbox will ensure that all the checks and balances, the risks are eliminated as much as possible. Then it helps to those sort of standardization of regulations. And I hope that sandboxes globally, as I know they do, all the regulators talk and compare notes, that the regulators compare notes and then we can get standards around what is expected across all these various silos. But a key part, I hope they continue, and they're much needed.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. David, we've run out of time, but thank you so much. And thank you so much for the audience questions. Everyone, please join me in thanking David for sharing his insights. Thanks, David.